Well, welcome to the regular meeting of the Lake Forest City Council, October the 2nd, 2018. We'll begin with the invocation. Tonight the invocation will be read by OCFA Chaplain Jeff Hetchel.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's an honor to be here. If you'd allow me to give thanks for us. God, what a special night to be here. I thank you that the faith community in Lake Forest is at peace, the business community is thriving, and their city is debt-free. What a gift. And we thank you in advance for all that. Also, God, I ask these men and women have sacrificed time with their families to lead us. Would you multiply their time? Would you give that time back to them so that they can enjoy the fruit of leadership, which is peace in your city? So I thank you. In your powerful name, I thank you. Amen.
Amen.
God bless you.
Thank you. Pledge of Allegiance tonight will be led by Council Member Robinson.
You'll join me in rising as we pledge allegiance to this wonderful symbol of freedom. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And do we have our student liaison here? Yes, there we go. Stefano Polito, student liaison from El Toro High School. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, council members. Stefano Polito here with the latest news out of El Toro High School. So last week, El Toro had its annual club rush, where every El Toro club has the opportunity to advertise themselves to the rest of the student body. Each club set up a booth complete with snacks and sign-up sheets so that students can sign up for any clubs that they're interested in. Our next school-wide event coming up very soon is our homecoming fair. During the fair, we will have rides and games that students can participate in, along with plenty of different food options that students can purchase while enjoying the fair. Speaking of homecoming, we have narrowed our candidates for our homecoming king and queen down to 5 ladies and gentlemen, who will be the homecoming court for our homecoming rally. Speaking of homecoming, it's rapidly approaching. The big night is October 13th, and the theme is going to be Alice in Wonderland. Our early bird ticket sales are ending this Sunday, so get them fast before they go up to full price. The freshman, sophomore, and junior classes will be taking the PSAT on October 10th, where the rest of the seniors of the school will be taking a trip during the PSAT to Knott's Berry Farm. We'll be having our back-to-school night tomorrow, October 3rd, for all of the parents of our student body. They will be able to meet with the students' teachers, learn important course information, and discuss their child's performance in class. As for ASB, we're implementing our class senate once again, which is where students outside of ASB can participate in ASB-related activities and help out. We're implementing it again after our trial run last year, which was successful, and our selection has finally been solidified. We expect them to be a huge help with the important upcoming events such as homecoming and the anticipated canned food drive. That's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for your time, and as always, go Chargers.
Stefano, you're a growing boy. Did you get some cake?
I did not. But
Go get some now.
yeah.
Thank you very much. City Clerk, I believe now you have some official documents for us to sign. We signed those blow-up documents, but we can't mail those, otherwise we wouldn't be debt-free anymore. And right now I'll ask each of the councilmen to sign the letter to the bondholders and the proclamation, and if you have some comments that you'd like to make, feel free to make them.
Mr. Mayor, just point of order. If you wouldn't mind announcing the title of the agenda item that we're on.
City Council ceremonial items. Item 1, proclamation declaring December 2nd, 2018 as debt-free day in the city of Lake Forest. Is that what you wanted me to announce? She's constantly editing me and telling me what to do, keeping me in line. Thank you very much. Can I have a motion to approve the presentation?
So moved.
Second.
think most of you were here earlier, but for those of you who weren't, this is a really big day for the city, and we're very pleased to be able to celebrate it. All right, shall we vote on the motion? Did we already?
I actually would like to make a statement before the
Sure,
vote.
please.
And I'll make a motion that we move the item forward. Someone would like to second that.
A second.
You know, Lake Forest is in a great situation because of councils from before. We wouldn't have the kind of money or the resources we have if it wasn't for the wisdom of councils that allowed to be visionaries in where we were going, a city manager that was a visionary in where we are now. So I think that the City of Lake Forest has had great leadership in the past, and I think that we're all striving to be that same leaders. But, you know, councilmen of Peter Herzog, Mark Teddemer, Kathy McCullough, Marcia Rudolph, Richard Dixon, Andrew Hamilton, had all led the city in a fine way. But we had a great city manager in Bob Dunnick who actually saw the forthcoming of what we are today, because he was the one with former councils that actually opened up the opportunity study, which allowed us to have the mixed use and the new housing and the new development that we have, that actually has brought the resources to the City of Lake Forest, that we have a debt-free city, that we have a civic center that's being built with cash. We have a 86-acre sports park that was built with cash, no debt. So the fact is that we all sit up here and will celebrate this great achievement and where we are today. But the fact is that, you know, we have a motto in Lake Forest. It's remember the past, but challenge the future. So I want to remember the council members, the city managers that we had for so many years that actually were the catalyst of where we are today. So this is a challenge to all of us as council members to achieve bold things. So we're in the process of doing a general plan update, which we'll be discussing later on. But the fact that
I believe that brief comments, Councilman.
We have the opportunity to still steer this city in a great way. So thank you to the council members. Thank you to the council members of past, and thank you to the city management of past. And may God continue to bless Lake Forest.
And thank you for your brief comment. Next on the issue is Fire Prevention Week, and our battalion chief is here.
I'm so sorry, Mr. Mayor. We did not complete the vote to move the presentations.
Oh, who didn't vote?
I have a first and a second. I have a motion and a second, but we just
okay.
need the vote.
I thought I voted.
That motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
Item 2, Fire Prevention Week. We have the battalion chief here. George Casario, please come forward. Do we have a thing? Is this on? Yeah. Is this on? Yeah. We were here about 3 weeks ago when we had the bee sting here in the city, and the fireman, one of whom was allergic to bees and didn't put on his protective uniform and went in, really at the risk of his own life, saving that woman and the other firemen who accompanied it. So we get a lot more from our fire department than simply preventing fires. But today we celebrate Fire Prevention Week, and it's a proclamation of the City Council. Hereby proclaim October 7th to 13th, 2018 as Fire Prevention Week throughout the city, encouraging all residents to use public safety measures and support the public safety activities and efforts of the Orange County Fire Authority's Fire and Emergency Services. Thank you very much. Let's hear it for our fire. We've reached the public comment section of the agenda. As a reminder, if you would like to participate, please fill out a blue speaker card, turn it into the city clerk, and your name will be called. And in addition, we have Facebook Live joining us. Typically, we hear the people first, and then we go to Facebook Live. Madam Clerk, have we received any requests to speak?
Yes, Your Honor. John Claycomb, followed by Rita Bradley.
Welcome.
Welcome. Before I start, congratulations to you guys and also the former council for being debt-free. I was watching the Facebook feed from last council meeting when I witnessed Lake Forest resident Josh Abner Viskay use this same public forum to blabber about freedom of religion, human rights, integrity, supposed rich clients of his, Russian parables, and those that are a danger to society, which finally somehow tied in to let us know about a John Bush from Marion County, Florida. In his criminal record that included lewd exhibition with minors, domestic violence, several DUIs, and worthless, a.k.a. bounce checks. Josh wants everyone to know that you can contact him and he will help you do your research. His problem, among other things, is that the above information is from someone named John H. Bush, not John J. Bush. While their ages are almost the same, the John that Viskay was connecting to is 2 months younger. Unlike Josh Viskay, I have to print out of John J. Bush's license and arrest paperwork from Florida that is for John H. Bush. I have it here. So while Josh was defaming the John Bush we all know, the council sat silently as his 2.5-minute diatribe was on display. Now, I apologize if it is only the mayor's discretion to intervene in situations like this, but I have witnessed a pattern of those that Mayor Gardner agrees with. The speaker gets to either attack a council member in Scott Voigt's or spreading lies about John J. Bush without one peep about asking if he has proof of these allegations. I assume if it was allegations against some others, there would have been something said, as we've experienced earlier when John Bush spoke here earlier in the year. The only one with no integrity, and actually some of the mentioned criminal records as a defendant, is Josh Viskay, which I have here. Drug possessions, forged bills, surprise, right? And pages of traffic violations that include open container. While I say this, I have all the paperwork for both men. Freedom of speech has restrictions, and I suggest you figure out where to place them, and for council should speak up on situations like this. So while we're on the subject of Viskay, why hasn't council given an update on District 3 fiasco where Viskay forged at least one signature entry and failed to qualify 20 legit signatures to qualify Adam and Josh's friend, Elliot Horowitz? They were suing our city to get the signatures validated, and we are going to pay for that attorney. Residents should not have to go to Facebook or the Patch to read from Lake Forest Council Watch what is going on with issues like that, where Adam, Nick, and Viskay are still causing issues within our city. Update us from here, not from outside sources. It'd be nice to have an update on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Rita Bradley, followed by Sunny Morper.
Welcome.
I was on my next door, and there was a little comment, and it said, "Oh no, not again." And so when I looked into it, it was having to do with a car struck on Ridge Route underneath the railroad tracks. And this has happened many, many times, and I'm just wondering what we can do. So before we came to the meeting tonight, we were looking at the signs, and there's this line thing that says don't pass under, you need to go underneath this to pass through. But the problem is, on both sides, they are just before the tunnel. So even if somebody said, oops, there's a problem, there's nothing they could do. There is no turnaround. So I'm thinking a couple things that would be very beneficial is from the side on Lake Forest going through that is not well marked with the 8-foot, if we could get one of those farther back behind with a big sign saying something up ahead is going to be a big problem, and that's at 3 lanes. They actually have a very nice turnaround. when you are coming from the Lake Forest 2 side, going to Lake Forest 1, it is, again, right before the tunnel, and there is no place to turn around. It is extremely small. And I'm thinking, again, we need to put that farther back, make the trucks aware, make anybody aware. And then the second thing I'm wondering if, and I don't know how we might be able to do this, but somewhere there's somebody designing these maps that we get with our MapQuest and all these other ones, that if there could somehow be some sort of a notation noting a narrow bridge or something like that ahead. Because it seems to me the majority, of course, are not by the people who normally use this. It's by people who don't use it and they don't know. But what it does is it impacts the people who normally use it for hours. So that's what I'm asking if we could look into. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I'm not sure the tunnel is the city property, but,
Not the tunnel, the signage.
well, again, ask the Public Works Director.
The tunnel itself and the particular height signs that she's talking about are not, but we can always look at going further out on city property as a warning sign and things of that nature. So we'll look into it.
Is there a way to prevent vehicles, like a sign that says no commercial vehicles through the tunnel or something like that? Not just having the sign posting, but really limiting the cars that are passing through that tunnel?
Yeah, and we can also look into how much of a problem this really is. Once every couple years.
If you've seen the bricks on the outside of the,
Yeah,
you can see that it's a problem.
No, it's kind of hilarious. You would think that driving up to the tunnel itself would be enough for them to understand, but we're dealing with the public. So maybe, but restricting all commercial traffic or all commercial for that one that may, we have to just weigh it. So we can go ahead and take a look at that and
Thank you.
see if we want to add some more signs and weigh in some other.
Who does the tunnel belong to?
The HOA.
Oh, it's the HOA, okay. Okay, next.
Sunny Morper, followed by Randy Johnson.
Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening to each of you, and congratulations on the debt-free status. It's a significant accomplishment on your part. Obviously, we stand on the shoulders of others, but you get the credit, and it's well-deserved. Thank you so much as one of your constituents. I wanted to mention that as one of your commissioners for traffic and parking, I'm pleased to report we unanimously recommended a pilot project to improve the flow of traffic at 6 intersections in our city. That's the good news. Unfortunately, this item will not come to you until November. It was my feeling this should be a consent item on your next agenda. Obviously, that's not the plan in place. Furthermore, I asked the question after our meeting was over last week, and from what budget shall that come? The response was a bit surprising in that it's not budgeted at this time. So a study's made, it comes to the commission, we say go for it because of the improvement in the possibility of traffic flow and so forth, and it's not even budgeted. Maybe I just don't understand that, but I thought I'd bring it to your attention as a citizen, and hopefully you'll get it up on the agenda as soon as possible so that a discussion can go forward relative to those two concerns. On the other matter that I wanted to share with you, the City Council election campaigns are well underway, as I'm sure you know. I look forward to the candidate forum hosted at the Sun and Sail Club this Thursday. As a reminder, it begins at 7 p.m. The Lake Forest 2 Master Homeowners Association has sponsored these events many times and with no complaints from candidates, citizens who were there, and they've always stated that the quality of the questions posed by moderators and respectful manner of the citizens who were there as they presented their feelings or their questions was always well done. It helps citizens to search for the person that they most want to vote for. I hope that you'll get a chance to be there as well. It should be an interesting evening. Thanks very much.
Okay. Thank you. Let me ask the city manager. We had that traffic advisory group, or whatever it was called. and some people think it didn't achieve very much. I'm a little bit worried that the new Traffic and Parking Commission might fall into that same rut. Do you have any sense, or can you get us a sense of how well they're doing, and are they moving along and achieving things? Sounds like maybe things aren't happening so smoothly.
Well, it's a meeting that happens once a month. I believe they've had 2 meetings thus far. The first meeting was really an orientation. The second meeting was spent on 2 items. They looked at the parking the parking permit policy, and they looked at the study on left turns, permissive left turns. And so, in terms of speed, things will be done and so forth. It's still a process. As Sonny mentioned, they looked at this report for permissive left turns, and there is no budget for some of the recommendations in that report. But I wouldn't expect there to be, because we can't presuppose the results of that report. So we wouldn't have budgeted for projects without having results. So I think the C tag is what you were referring to before. That was advisory. This is an actual commission. So I do think there will be more progress. But again, they've only had 2 meetings so far. So what we can do is just, as we do with all commissions, include the minutes in your packet, and so we can continue to discuss what they have on their plate. And then a lot of the action from that commission as well is going to be based on what we budget for their activities. So I believe we've budgeted for some studies during this current fiscal year, but a lot of their actions are going to be based on the available resources we allocate for that commission as well. So we can, after 6 months, we can continue to refine, what's going on with that commission, since it is brand new.
Yeah, 6 months sounds like a long time, but I understand what you're saying.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Did we not go forward with a city directive that we were going to go and experiment with 6 intersections for permissive lefts? Did we gone forward with that project?
We commissioned a study to look at 6, and so that's what we did. And so now we have the results of the study, and so then the next step in the process would be to present that back to the council and then talk about budgeting and so forth.
Yeah, actually, I thought it was 17.
I was surprised when I heard 6, but I thought it was...
Did you think it was 17 too? Yeah, me too.
If I may, we actually looked at all the intersections in the whole city. We evaluated them based on a set of criteria, and we'll go walk the council through that. And so each intersection has been looked at, and then we came up with 6 that we recommended that to the Traffic Commission, that the Traffic Commission then recommended onto the council, and you'll see that shortly.
Okay.
We're not the first city that's venturing out into permissive left turns. And so there's other cities that are doing it and being very successful with it. So I would hope that we could maybe, for the drivers, it might be good if we push that along. But thank you.
Okay, next, for those of you who are maybe unaware, in the public comments, we are allowed to briefly comment or briefly direct staff, but it doesn't open us up for a general discussion or take action from items raised during public comment. So that's, if it seems like we're truncating our discussions, it's because by law we can't pursue them in greater detail. In any event, the next person?
Randy Johnson, followed by Vincent Burke.
Well, howdy, Council. Randy Johnson, Lake Forest, and you know who I am. Mr. Morper over here, I would be pleased as punch if my friend and a colleague who sat on the HOA board with me was moderating the candidate forum. I mean, I would be very happy about that, too, and I'm sure each of you would be. The reason I'm here tonight is caught my attention last meeting when Nikki Motazetti spoke, and she was concerned about the moderators for the upcoming candidate forum. And she was concerned that the moderator, again, was a close friend of Mr. Morper's, and I was concerned that he's sitting on the Traffic Commission. And I'm saying, hold it, he's a political appointee, along with this other gentleman, Jordan Vilwalk. He's also on the Traffic Commission, okay? Political appointee. Mr. Vilwalk was appointed by, or nominated by Ms. Basil, and Mr. Reichert was nominated by Mr. Cagley. I don't like this type of politics in Lake Forest. This is Chicago-style politics. We should have an outsider come in here to the city to moderate candidate forums. There's just too much potential for improprieties going on, on such an important event and electoral process. That is just wrong. And for nobody to speak up when Ms. Motazetti brought this to your attention, nobody said a damn thing. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. You know that this is not right, that you shouldn't have two political appointees, one of which sits on the same board with Mr. Morper over here. They shouldn't be actually moderating this event, should be outsiders or somebody who's disengaged with Lake Forest politics. It's just absolutely disgraceful. And so again, I'm not saying anything corrupted would take place, but at the same time, it shouldn't go unnoticed that there is a potential for impropriety here. This is like not Chicago-style politics, Tijuana-style politics. It's wrong. You know it's wrong. I don't have to tell you that. You should be ashamed of yourselves for not bringing this up and commenting after her comment. So no wonder nobody wants to run for office in Lake Forest. So we have one candidate in District 3, two candidates in 2 and 4. For God's sakes, you told us, Gardner, that people were going to flock and become candidates with district elections. What a bunch of horse pooey. No, now we have nobody here, nobody to choose from. Democracy has been shot dead in the city of Lake Forest. Thanks to you, sir.
Thank you for your comments. For your information, the city does not control the candidate forum. It's controlled by Lake 2 HOA. Next, please.
Vincent Burke, followed by Bob Holtzclaw.
Good evening, Vincent Burke, Lake Forest. I direct your attention to the 3 photographs you should have or are being distributed now. It said that a picture's worth 1,000 words, and there are 3 of them right there. Shortly after taking the photograph on the 30th, down at the bottom there, the gentleman who lives at that corner unit was standing at his front entrance on his cell phone, and he gave me a big thumbs up and a smile. So we engaged in a little conversation from across the street, and he indicated that sometime earlier he had seen somebody also depositing some item at that corner. He called out to them and said, "Hey, what are you doing? There's a sign there. Why are you dumping that there?" Their response was, "We don't care." Okay? Apparently this individual was, the person who lives at that residence was unconcerned or didn't know what to do in that case. But as for having these really nice signs there, all I can say is that being a resident of that area for many years is what Dr. Phil McGraw might ask at this point, and how's that working for you? I don't hold anyone here responsible for this. People who are responsible live on Village Drive. Thank you very much.
Chief Valentine, can you speak to that and maybe give some advice to the residents that live in that area to maybe help them if they see something like this happening?
He doesn't have the picture. There's a sign that says no dumping, and 3 different days. It's a mattress, a washing machine, and a couch dumped right in front of the sign.
Well, my only suggestion would be if they see this happening to call Sheriff's Dispatch to have a deputy come out, and hopefully we can catch them in the act.
Maybe take a picture of the license plate or something?
Yeah, that's a start. But I wouldn't want to recommend somebody run out in the car to try to stop someone or to be confrontational and get a license plate. The best thing to do is call Sheriff's Dispatch and try to give as much information as you can and be a good witness.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next.
Bob Holtzclaw.
Bob Holtzclaw, resident of Lake Forest. Talking about the candidate last week, or last meeting we had, about coming up and saying that she was going to be into the lion's den, so to speak, quite frankly, was kind of ridiculous. What we've done in the past, and I've wrote up the questions for all of you at one time. Matter of fact, a couple of times. Never once was it a "I gotcha" question. And I defy anyone here to say that we caught you, in some sort of a question that was something that you couldn't answer, just to make you look, uninformed or anything else. Matter of fact, many of you got the same question. And whoever, Jim Riker is the president of the HOA, and he's going to do it again. We try to get other people. Matter of fact, to try, to be the host, but everybody kind of declined, so that's why Jim Riker is in there. That's a person who I wouldn't want in any place. Matter of fact, I could care less. Matter of fact, the statements here tonight I thought were pretty shameful, especially when you don't have any information on how these things are run, and you get ridiculous statements like this, and that's what happens. But that's it. But we get
Mr. Johnson, please, this is not your backyard or football game.
Yeah.
I understand, and you have talked about other. This is not the place for dialogue.
Stop talking about me now.
Well, when you
I
make
won't tolerate
ridiculous
another
statements, you've got to be talked about. But anyhow, we hope everybody's going to be there. Matter of fact, we even asked the Baker Ranch to do a meet the candidates up there, and so far they've declined. And we're talking about SB 407, and still I don't think we've had any word back yet if they want to do one up there. We were also very considerate with the Nikki. She had an open house at our club without any problem, and we let her speak. She had her own little area. She invited her friends, and she spoke. No problems at all. So telling that our club is somehow going to be biased or anything like that is far from the truth. Thank you.
Can I say
Thank
something
you.
real quick? The one thing I did observe when I went through the candidate forum 2 years ago when I was elected is I found that the questions were extremely fair. I didn't feel there was any bias at all. All the candidates got asked the same questions, and then it was opened up to the residents asking specific questions for specific candidates. And these forums have been going on for years and years before any of these sitting council members have been here, and I'm sure it will go on from here forward when we're all gone. And I think it's a great resource. Again, we don't have any control over what an HOA does with their HOA property or how they conduct it, but I have to say, in my personal experience, I found it an extremely fair and worthwhile effort.
But there is, you can see how a candidate like Nikki, who's a new candidate for Lake Forest City Council, or someone that's a veteran, a Mark Teddemer, would be somewhat concerned about going in there when the two that are doing the debate, hosting it, are both appointees of council members that have endorsed against both of these candidates. So there is a perceived bias against them. So, I mean, I don't understand why you guys are arguing about this. The fact is, it's just a perceived thing, maybe, because I think that it will be fair. I think that Jim will do a good job, I believe, and I believe it'll be fair. So, their perception that there could be some hanky-panky going around, look at what CNN did with the debates for presidential. So the fact is, it's not beyond the realm of possibility, and so it's just a perception that I think that we should have stayed away from. But maybe in future years we can look at maybe hosting one at the sports park or something, or the Lake Forest Chamber could host. But right now it is what it is, and the Sun and Sail Club has made the offer to the candidates that are running opposed, and I think that I believe it will be fair. I'm hoping it will be fair, but there is a presumption that it could be hanky-panky. So the fact is, and then that Nikki's event at the Sun and Sail Club was trailed by you and Larissa Clark, Mr. Holtzclaw. So, you guys left her alone, but the fact is you guys threw some hostile questions at her is what I heard. Nothing further.
Mr. Mayor, if we could just move on from the political conversation, that would be great.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's possible, but I certainly will try to do that.
Yeah, just in terms of the council legally shouldn't be delving into politics from the dais if we can avoid that.
Okay, do we have anyone else?
Nothing further
Blue
from the
cards?
public, but
Facebook? Welcome, Facebook Live, folks.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have one. Josh Abner Viskay, comment to council. The public comments made about my record is categorically wrong, and all the speaker said is false and malicious, and want to council members to save me a copy of the person provided to hold him accountable legally. Interesting, the speaker did not refute John J. Bush's convictions for domestic violence, IRS liens, and not paying taxes on the $160,000 he got from former Lake Forest Councilman Adam Nick. John J. Bush admitted to exposing himself to minors inexplicably on the Facebook page True Lake Forest Neighborhood Watch and discussion page for all of you to see. All of the signatures I collected are true and correct.
Okay, thank you. Earlier, Councilman Robinson talking about the greatest nation, which I think we all agree. In our First Amendment, gives people the right of free speech, so people can get up here, and generally speaking, we just move on and we don't get into the debates between who said what and what is true and what isn't true. It's your right to come and express yourselves, and we listen to it and move on. Anyone else? No? Anyone else? Facebook Live? Okay.
Mr. Mayor.
I'm sorry, sir, we have one that came in.
Oh, okay.
Comment to council, Colette Katie. I'm hearing more things about the stabbing from yesterday at the apartment complex off Geronimo and El Toro. I know we have a gang unit within the sheriff. There is no coverage with facts about what happened. I understand this is an ongoing investigation. How can they stop this from escalating even more?
Chief, could you tell us what you can tell us?
So yesterday in Forest Glen Apartments, there was a stabbing that turned out to be a homicide in the city. The Sheriff's Homicide Unit and the Gang Enforcement Unit, along with a whole cadre of investigators, combed the area, talked to as many people as they could, and to establish what happened. At this time, there are 2 people in custody regarding that homicide. The investigation is ongoing, and that's kind of where we're at this point.
Any advice you can give to the residents in the area? I'm sure they're a little nervous about what's happened. Anything that they can do to help?
As always, if they hear of things going on or they see something going on, is to call the Sheriff's Department to report it. We can't help or act or react to things if we don't have the information.
Yeah, I just want to commend Miss Katie, who came in on Facebook, because there's an issue of concern to people, and she had a question. We get a chance to clarify. There's probably all kinds of rumors and all kinds of things on social media, people saying all kinds of crazy stuff. There's a really useful way to use the forum and to use the City Council or Facebook Live in a constructive way instead of trying to tear down people. So thank you very much, Katie, for your comment.
We have one more, Your Honor. Martin Henderson, comment to council. How does Councilman Scott Voigt reconcile displaying campaign signs a week before the legal window? He had 5 signs posted in the El Toro Meats Shopping Center on August 30th, and although 3 of those signs were removed a day or 2 later, 2 signs continued to be posted outside one of the storefronts. Mr. Voigt has continued to break rules that apparently don't apply to him. Mr. Voigt has had his campaign signs posted in illegal locations in each of his 2 previous campaigns, and he is now 3 for 3. As a reminder, signs on light standards do not comply with the city ordinances. Councilman Robinson claimed in his 26th campaign that he would be a watchdog and, quote, insist on the highest standards of ethics and accountability for all city officials, end quote. What does Mr. Robinson plan to do to hold Mr. Voigt accountable for another one of these ethical lapses? Also, it has been more than 5 months since Mr. Voigt assured council members, including Tom Cagley and Leah Basile, who he described as his brother and sister in Christ, that he would provide a retraction for his inappropriate comments that he acknowledged were false in exchange for tabling a discussion of a censure. An acknowledgement of the statement is not a retraction of the statement. That was more than 5 months ago. My question, again, is where can this retraction be found, or is this another example of Mr. Voigt's being derelict in his duty and acting with impunity?
It was an event that happened, and the signs were up. They were supposed to bring him down. I have nothing more to say. They brought him down the next day. So when he says that, and reaction, I apologize for calling him a paid political hack, but clearly evidence shows that he is a political hack, but maybe I can't prove that he's paid, but he is a political hack, and I'm sorry for calling him a paid political hack, and I stand by that. And I apologize for calling him a paid political hack.
Anybody else from Facebook? No, sir. Okay, thank you. It moves us to the
Mr. Mayor, I wanted to comment on some of the public comments. Mainly just questions. So for the city attorney, there was a question. It's been brought up on two sides of an issue about liability at the public comment mic. I know that there's freedom of speech, but at some point, do we end up incurring any liability if we allow something to be said multiple times, that we know to be untrue? What abilities do public commenters have for slander against one another? Do they have anything, or is that freedom of speech at the public comment mic? People can say whatever they want. Can you give a little bit of general guidance here, because I think there's a lot of questions that both public commenters as well as we have.
Sure, Mr. Mayor, council members, I'll be brief here. The public, as noted by the mayor and Councilman Robinson, have broad free speech rights at council meetings. If the council were to prevent or prohibit speakers from saying the things, for example, that were addressed this evening on an assumption that they are false or could be false, that would amount to what's called a prior restraint of speech, which you learn in the first week of constitutional law is unconstitutional. Now, a private individual could have a cause of action against a different individual for slander or defamation. That could certainly be brought. If it turns out that the statements that were made were false and were knowingly false, that is not the job of the council to police those kinds of statements. Now, if there are statements that are made that are disruptive or truly inflammatory, meaning using certain words, the council can stop those words from being said and stop disruptive speech. Short of that, it is very difficult for the council and the mayor especially to intervene with the comments, the kind of comments that we've heard about this evening.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers that question. I appreciate that. Hopefully that brings a little clarity to anyone. If individual commenters have a question, could they talk to you? Do they have that ability to?
I've actually received a phone call or two about this very issue from commenters. So they can talk to me after the meeting, before the meeting. They can reach out to me, and I can explain to them what the council can and cannot do, what their free speech rights are, and again, this idea of prior restraint, where the council simply cannot be the arbiter of what they believe is true or false. That's when we actually do get into the realm of liability. You aren't liable for what somebody says until you stop them from saying what you think they should or should not say.
Okay, and then there was another question about a case that was brought with respect to the election, this election cycle. We typically don't. You report out what comes out of closed session, but other than that, we usually don't report out on legal issues of any kind. But if someone wants to, I would assume they can always search databases for the City of Lake Forest and any litigation we're involved in to look at rulings, judgments, or just briefs that are filed, whatever they might be.
That's exactly correct.
Okay. All right. And let's see. Then just finally, the last public commenter on Facebook there address me specifically. So I just want to say that, first of all, with each one of us, I mean, we need to hold ourselves accountable to complying with our ordinances, our code of conduct, all those sorts of things. If someone's in violation of those, including myself, I encourage everyone to call us out. I know that campaigns bring a lot of passion and vigor to each one of us, and those that are supporting or opposing us. If I recall specifically the event that the public commenter was talking about, it was a special private event that one of the council members was holding, and it was no surprise that there were some signs up, but at times those signs don't come down. How I would typically respond to a situation like that would be, if I was aware of it, I would tell the individual that they needed to make sure those were removed rather than just chastising immediately. I think that we just need to try to hold ourselves accountable. So it's Councilman Voights, maybe the next time you have an event that's outside the 45-day window, you might want to count how many get put down and how many get pulled up when you're having a special event like that. But that's the only suggestion that I would give all of us with respect to that specific event. But we should just try to hold each other accountable as much as we can, and expect that the residents hold us accountable as well. So we're here to lead each and every one of you, and we can't do that if we're not following what rules we put in place for ourselves. So please hold us accountable.
Moving on to the consent calendar, tonight we will conduct one vote for all items listed in the consent calendar. Items 3 through 8 under the consent calendar are considered routine and will be enacted by one vote. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless members of the City Council, public, or staff request specific items be removed from the consent calendar for separate action. Madam Clerk, have you received any requests to remove an item from the consent calendar?
No, Your Honor.
Colleagues? Then I will entertain them.
Consent calendar.
Second.
Okay, please vote. And what's the problem?
I don't have a registered vote for Councilman Voights. That motion carries unanimously.
Okay, discussion items, item number 9. General Plan Update Status Report and Authorization to commence Phase 2 of the General Plan 2040 Update, submitted by Director of Community Development.
I'd like to introduce our Director of Community Development, Gail Ackerman, for a presentation on the General Plan Update.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. This evening, I would like to introduce our General Plan consultants. You've met them before. From De Novo, Mr. Ben Ritchie and Amanda Strapiano. They're here this evening to provide an update on the activities for the General Plan Update. Excuse me, we need 2 minutes to get our presentation up and running. If you'll just be patient here.
For those of you who are interested, the General Plan Advisory Committee is meeting Thursday night. Unfortunately, meeting at the night as the candidate forum, so people will have to choose between the candidate forum and the General Plan Advisory Committee meeting. Jonathan, is that going to be on Facebook? Will we record that meeting so people could watch it?
Yes, sir. The planning director asked us to broadcast it live, and then it'll stay up on Facebook after that.
Okay, so you can go to the candidate forum, and later you could watch the General Plan Advisory Committee on tape. Thank you. while we're waiting, you can all get yourselves another piece of cake. There's plenty of cake left there. By the way, the cake is from Ephraim's Bakery, which is in the Sizzler Shopping Center, and is a great local Lake Forest bakery with great cake pops and juice drinks. And I definitely recommend you go to a Lake Forest business, which is coming up later on the agenda.
All right, thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. We'll wait for our council members to rejoin us. All right, thank you. Thank you, Gail, for the introduction, and we appreciate being here again this evening. Again, my name is Amanda Tropiano. I'm a principal planner with De Novo Planning Group, and I've had the pleasure of working with the City of Lake Forest throughout this year on your general plan update. Tonight, we're here to provide you with your quarterly briefing. We were here previously in the months of May and July to provide similar briefings to the status of our work. Tonight we'll be preparing a brief presentation on the work completed as part of Phase 1, including tasks complete and those tasks still remaining to be completed, and then a preview of Phase 2. As you've seen before, the city's approach to its general plan update is broken into 3 phases. We're at the stage of we're winding down the majority of the work in Phase 1 and beginning the work of Phase 2. The overall project schedule is approximately 2 years. We kicked off the project in early January of 2018. I did want to point out that the 3 phases are not sequential. They do happen concurrent. Phases 1 and 2 overlap as we work on some of the tasks we'll be discussing tonight. The intent of the first phase, which is to envision the future of Lake Forest, was to collect and analyze existing conditions, engage the public regarding their vision for the future of your community, and identify opportunities and constraints that require further analysis in the phases. All tasks involved in this phase have been completed on time and on budget, and those are detailed as attachment 1 to your staff report tonight. The first component of the Phase 1 work program involved a preliminary preparation, including your overall project schedule and approach, and a robust amount of data collection to feed into the background studies and analytical tools. That included traffic counts at all of your roadway intersections and all of your roadway segments. We completed a series of detailed background studies and analytical tools and packaged that material in an administrative draft existing conditions report. That draft is available in hard copy in the council office. Upon final review and approval, it will be printed and provided to all council members, as well as your GPAC members, and be available in public locations and online as well. As a reminder, the majority of the existing conditions report will serve as a foundation for the future environmental report, providing us a leg up as we get through that 3rd phase of the process. The final component involved identification of opportunities and challenges, which is also under an administrative staff review. We've completed a significant amount of public engagement and visioning at this. I see several familiar faces in the audience with us tonight. As part of this work, we've developed a standalone dedicated project website, conducted 3 visioning workshops, 2 pop-up events, completed an online vision and values survey, which received over 800 responses, prepared the vision and values outreach summary report, which is available on the project website, an administrative draft vision plan document. Per your direction, we worked through the process of forming the General Plan Advisory Committee and hosted the first meeting on September 6th. The second meeting is this coming Thursday. We've had periodic council consultations and briefings, and then also presented to your executive roundtable. The vast array of work that we've been doing has been prepared and available on the project website, and links to all of the material has been provided as part of the summary table in attachment 1. The remaining components of the Phase 1 work program include the ongoing public outreach that's conducted for the duration of the General Plan Update project, including all remaining General Plan Advisory Committee meetings, community workshops, stakeholder interviews, online feedback and surveys, and the public hearing process upon completion of the draft general plan and environmental documents. There are a number of analytical tools that were also identified for preparation in Phase 1 that happened concurrent with the work completed in Phase 2. Specifically, that includes preparation of the fiscal model and the greenhouse gas analysis.
All right. Good to see everybody again. As a reminder, I'm Ben Ritchie, a principal with De Novo Planning Group. So I just wanted to talk very briefly about some of the efforts we're engaging in as we move forward into Phase 2 of this work effort. So as Amanda mentioned, we had a very successful kickoff meeting with the GPAC. Members got a chance to have an orientation and an overview of what we're doing in terms of the general plan. And for this second meeting here on Thursday, we are diving straight into some of the weighty and meatier topics of the general plan update. So what we're going to be discussing on Thursday with the GPAC is some of their conceptual ideas regarding potential changes or non-changes to your general plan land use map. And we're going to take this feedback, this very preliminary initial feedback, which will be dovetailing with what we heard from the community during our visioning workshops, and developing some land use map alternatives. And these alternatives are going to paint different pictures or different scenarios for what future growth levels, locations and type of growth, and intensity of growth might look like as you look forward over the next 20 years or so. And these are going to be the subject of the Land Use Alternatives Report, which we're going to prepare after these different alternatives and maps have been developed. So the Alternatives Report is a very powerful and useful tool for the community, City Council, Planning Commission, the GPAC, as well as staff and the consultant team. It's going to help us identify and analyze 3 land use alternatives for each of the key focus areas that we identify within the city. We're going to identify and consider potential impacts related to land use, circulation, traffic patterns, economic development considerations, public safety, and the environment related to each of these different land use mapping scenarios. And ultimately, the report, it's not going to have recommendations, but what it is going to be a very useful tool as the GPAC considers their final recommendations for how the land use map ought to be developed. And this will also be presented to council and be looking for your input as well. And once we start to get a little bit more traction on where we think we're heading with this land use map, we're going to be diving into the actual general plan policy document itself. And so we're going to be developing comprehensive goals, policies, and action items. We're going to make sure we hit all of the 7 mandated topics required by state planning law. These include land use, circulation, open space, conservation, safety, noise, housing, and environmental justice. And we're also planning to tackle what we consider to be optional topics or optional elements at the direction of the city, which would include economic development as a standalone element. We'll also be addressing fiscal sustainability, community character, and community health and wellness. And so that's the primary game plan as we move forward through this next Phase 2 of the work progress or work program and really dive in with the GPAC. And so, Gail, did you have anything you wanted to wrap up in terms of final comments?
No, that's it. The recommended action is to receive the general plan update status report. Of course, the consultants are here to answer any questions that you have, and then to authorize Phase 2 of the general plan update process.
Do we have any comments or questions from the
No, you're not from the public, perhaps
Facebook?
from Facebook?
We do have one comment from Facebook, sir. Josh Abner Vizquay, comment to council. My concern about the general plan is wealthy individuals or corporations paying for the general plan to change, quote, after the fact, close quote, colon. Legally, what controls can be placed to avoid this?
I suppose he said the magic word legally, and I think what he means is we have a general plan as we've had for many years, and it says we're going to do something with a piece of land, and then a developer comes along and says, I don't want you to do that, I'd rather do this. And then the council votes to change the general plan, and then the developer gets to do pretty much what he wants to do. And I'm assuming that's what the question is. Is there any way to stop a city council from changing a general plan, which would seem like a crazy thing to do, but that's your question.
Mr. Mayor, there's a short answer and a long answer. The short answer is no. The government code allows for future amendments to the general plan as requested. The longer answer, shortened is that that is a legislative act, meaning that there are no findings required. Translated, that means the council can do what it wants to do with that, but you cannot tie the hands of yourself or future councils because the government code allows for that process.
Okay, then, colleagues, did you have some questions?
Thanks for the time you spent in Lake Forest. I hope it was enjoyable for when you had your pop-ups and meeting with the community. Your first advisory committee, how did it go? There was a lot of debate about what kind of people were going to be involved. I'm glad staff and you were able to find, I just wanted like an update of what kind of people, and are they excited about being involved with our general plan update?
Thank you so much for the question. We're happy to elaborate because it was a very positive, engaging meeting at our first workshop on the 6th of September. We have 18 members that committed to serving as part of your general plan advisory committee. They respond to the categories that Council directed us to pursue to find the individuals to compose this group for you. And the tone was very, very positive. Everyone was looking forward to hearing each other's perspectives, learning from each other, and thinking about the future of Lake Forest, and really looking forward 15, 20 years to what the community could be, and just excited to be committed to the group and excited to participate for the next 10 meetings.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I was there. I thought it was okay. I have a couple of comments, and then I have a story to tell, and then I want to get into some more details. First, the comments on the material that's on the website, which is, I guess, I don't even know what it is. It's some descriptive measure. The people said this, and 800 people said that, and then one by one you listed these are the 300 things they said. That material is honestly not very useful at all, and it's just, these are the 300 different responses. So you need to do a better job in summarizing that. In addition, you need to give us some meaning, not just simply put it out there. Here it is. You need to say that's what it means and give us some context. And we have other data in the past. And how does what you're perceiving now and what people are telling you now, how does that relate? Is that a change? Are we on a trend towards changing things, or is that a standalone aberrant thing? So you need to do it. You did a lot. There's a lot there, but you actually could do more with less than what you've given us. So those are my comments on what's up there. Here's my story. My story is it's 1900, and the five of us, it's you, Scott, part of the five of us, and Leah and Tom and Dwight and I, we're sitting at the town hall meeting in Lake Forest, and we've got the de novo livery group up here talking to us about the next 20 years. And because we have problems with where we locate the stables, and the blacksmith, the smoke from the blacksmith is getting on people's nerves, so maybe we need to relocate the blacksmith somewhere else. And of course, all the horse stuff in the middle of the thing. So we've now contracted with them with 10 bags of gold, I guess, to go out and give us a study on how we can design the stables and the blacksmith and how we can better collect the horse manure. And we finished. We're feeling pretty good. We're going to go over to the bar and get a drink. We walk outside the city hall because there is no electricity in 1900, and this is in the daytime. And we walk, and sure enough, coming down the street is one of those newfangled, what do you call them, horseless carriages. And it, of course, makes a really loud noise. And the mayor, she covers her ears and says, "Oh, my goodness." And we go inside and we have a drink. And 20 years later, the stables and the blacksmiths and the horses, et cetera, et cetera. I believe we're at a point like that now in 2018. I believe that the rate of change going on in society is so profound and fundamental that your approach, or the approach we've asked you to take, is a bit like the livery stables and the blacksmiths. And you take any area, cars, we think we have parking and traffic, and at the same time Uber and Lyft are fundamentally changing the nature of travel. Maybe not this year, maybe in 5 years, surely in 10 years. How about retail? Does anybody have any idea what the hell is going to happen in retail? That's changing dramatically. What about drones? Are we going to have drone landing ports? I mean, these things are happening at such a rate. How about commerce? How about Venmo? Somebody just introduced me to Venmo. Oh, yeah, that's right, you have Venmo. And workplace and, working from home. We are changing so fundamentally, it seems ridiculous to me that we want a piece of paper that's going to tell us what's going to happen in 20 years. I think that's going to be out of date in a rapid future. So what I'm looking for from you, it's the epiphany I had at the meeting. If you remember, and then I didn't want to discuss it with the group because I'm not supposed to talk at the group. God forbid I should talk at the groups. And I almost never do. But I said then that I would bring it up here because this is the place to try to have that discussion. My belief is we don't need, there are certain legal requirements we need to meet. I'm not saying we don't meet those legal requirements, whatever those are. But what we need more than trying to figure out where the retail space is going to be 20 years from now is we need a set of principles, a set of guidelines, fundamental ways of looking at the world that will give us the edge in looking at the next kinds of decisions we're going to make. And I laid some of them out here, and this is just like off the top of my head. For example, given the fact that a piece of land has varying revenue and expense implications for a city, what are the likely outcomes of zoning residential, commercial, office, and retail? The next 10 acres we're able to use, what should that be? What is the formula? For a city of our projected size, let's say it's 100,000 people, which is probably where we're going, what's the proper mix of residential, commercial, office, and retail, along with open space and parks? What is the ideal, or the parameters of an ideal? And where do we sit now, and how does that fit the ideal? That'll let us know. Should we be developing Whispering Park? Maybe not. Maybe we're already too parked out. Or maybe we're not parked enough. We should be doing that. That should be a high priority. These are the kinds of guidelines I'm looking for. For every 10,000 people, how much park acreage and open space should we provide? And does this vary depending upon age and the demographics? Looking at the business sector, are we best served by concentrating on some basic sectors? Or should we be looking at wide diversity? Our former finance director convinced me that our diversity is a strength, and that's a good thing. But what are the parameters of that diversity? When the company At Home, furniture superstore, wanted to come to Lake Forest, and they were having trouble coming to Lake Forest. So I took some time, and Carlo took a lot of time, and we worked really hard to be sure that they came in and occupied 80,000 square feet up there in Foothill Ranch. Should we have been doing that? Do we need more furniture stores in Lake Forest? Maybe we should have been looking at something else and not worked so hard to do that. Or maybe we should have worked even harder. So those are the kinds of principles I'm looking for. Rather than coming up with 3 maps, here's your 3 maps, pick them. I'd rather have 3 principles. I'd rather have 10 principles. Things that the next time we have an issue, Nakasi Nursery, 122 acres. Do we need more houses? Maybe we need something else. Maybe we do. We don't know. We're floating in the dark. Now, there is research out there on all these things, but what that research lacks is it lacks application to our city. Given our demographics, given our 15.5 square miles and our 37% Hispanic, 15% Asians, et cetera, et cetera. How do those principles, how can we fit what we know, what you guys, I'm sure, know, actually, out there? How can that be a guide to us in how we go forward, so that we don't have to worry about a map? The map won't make a difference. We'll have principles to work by. So what I'm looking for from my colleagues here, because we've tasked you with one thing, and I'm changing horses in midstream, or whatever it is, changing horses in midstream, is that the expression? Yeah. Yeah, for 1900, that's right. Changing horses, exactly. Is, for us to review, they have a document, and what I'm asking is that it's in the council office. If in the next 2 weeks you can all get a chance to go through the document, think about what I've said about reorienting our point of view, because they need to, right now they're on a certain path. This isn't a completely different path, but it is going to change the nature of what you're doing. So I'd like you in the next 2 weeks to review this and come back in 2 weeks, and then we can have a discussion about, do we want to, as a council, want to go in that direction of the principles and guides, or do we stick with what we've decided to do? And the more I've thought about this since that first meeting, I'm convinced that this is last century's technology. We need to approach it differently.
Well, if I may respond, Mr. Mayor, I thought that was an excellent synopsis of the challenges we face in terms of the art and science of a general plan update. And frankly, everything I heard from you doesn't, to me, sound like a redirect of our work program or where we're planning to go from here. So I want to make sure I clarify. The document that's in administrative draft form right now is a technical document with no heart, no spirit, and no vision. It is the snapshot of our existing conditions. So it talks about the current traffic levels, the acres of wetland, the types of species, what the air quality monitoring data tells us, and it does not have vision in it, and it's not intended to. So this is intended to be a factual representation of our baseline starting point from a series of criteria across the different things we look at in terms of the general plan. But the general plan itself, it's going to have the map, which will take up a single piece of paper, and it will dictate what can be built where, at what density on each given parcel within the city. But that is just a small snippet of what the plan is. The plan is going to be made up of exactly those visionary policies and guiding principles that you're alluding to, and coming up with the correct language to make sure that it provides enough certainty to your residents, to future councils, to your development community, while also providing enough flexibility to make sure that we're responding to the obsolete buggy whips and the typewriter repairmen that are going out of business as industries change, as travel patterns change, as the need for parking changes. Making sure that we've built enough flexibility in there because we have these guiding principles to fall back on. And that is one of the primary mandates of the GPAC as this group works together over the next year or so, is crafting what that vision ought to look like and making sure that those guiding principles are representative of what we want the future to look like, understanding that we don't know all the nuanced details of how technology will change and at what pace. So when I hear you say the comment like, oh, we may be course correcting on your work program, that's been our intent all along. So the map is really just one component of how the future of Lake Forest is going to be guided, but the policies, the actions, and the goals that are made up of the rest of the general plan, I think are going to paint the exact picture that you're alluding to. And the challenges and examples that you gave, I was sitting here smiling because these are the challenges we're facing in other communities right now with their general plans, and this is what we get out of bed to work on every day. So we're looking forward to tackling.
Well, that's great. I'm tickled pink. I didn't see it. So maybe I'm ahead of.
You're ahead
I'm
of
too
yourself.
far ahead.
We are starting
So
that
that's-
process right now. So there's no vision in the documents you have, and we're starting that process to start to craft that policy guidance now.
That's great, and we don't have to worry about the stables. Terrific. I'm so happy to see it. So you don't, but you should anyway. You should go read this. It's very interesting. Read it anyway. Then I'm tickled pink. Thank you very much.
So on that, I'm glad you guys have a crystal ball, and we'll be using that crystal ball to lay out. But I thank you for your time that you've done in phase one, and so I'll move staff recommendation that we move on.
A second.
Receive and file.
Okay, vote.
I just wanted to provide a few comments. I appreciate the discussion we've had, and I agree with a lot of what the mayor said, and I appreciate your response too. I think that the one thing that I want to make sure that we're focusing on is the fact that this is our community, and we decide what all of these parameters are, right? So I'd like to know in general kind of what some thoughts are about how many parks are good in a city our size. But a lot of cities our size might not place the same priority level that we do on certain aspects, whether it's commerce, right, or whether it's parks. I mean, There's a city in California called the City of Commerce, and it is all about commerce. And when you take the population, the daytime population of that city versus ours, they probably have very few parks in general, right? We have a different approach. The name of this city is part of that, right? So when we call ourselves Lake Forest, if we didn't have lakes, that would be a problem for us. So this map needs to have blue on it, right? And there needs to be forests, and there should be a focus on trees. You know, we've put a lot of emphasis on parks and recreation in this community. So, but that's for the residents, and that's what's in phase 1. Those are the opportunities that you had of reaching out to the public, asking those questions about what they want to see in their city. And again, I agree with you. I would love to know some of those general parameters. How many acres should we have per 10,000 residents? But that's what I'm really focused on more than anything else, is what do our residents want to see? What do they expect the balance to be? And, you know, some of that was determined prior to cityhood for us. We weren't able to lay out a city from scratch like some completely master planned cities. So we're dealing with some legacy issues that maybe they wouldn't have been the way the residents would have planned it if they had a chance to all get in a room and say, what do we want the city to look like? But we have what we have here, and so as we adjust uses, as we're looking at, you know, the Amazoning of retail, as we're looking at the, you know, Teslification of transportation, you know, what's that going to do to a community like ours, and where do we see that going? We've talked a lot about, you know, potentially bringing in a futurist to kind of help guide us, and I think that there's a lot of value in having experts do that. But, you know, at the end of the day, the subject matter experts on Lake Forest are the people who live here, the ones that have lived here for decades, the ones that have lived here for a dozen days, and they all have a certain vision that they see. The tough part, and I know that you're seeing this in every city that you go into, is how do you find a collective, unified vision with, right now, roughly 85,000 people? And that's a big challenge that each one of us have. And you know, we're elected, the 5 of us, to try to help find a cohesive vision from those 85,000 people and then push it forward. And it's a huge task that we have. The one saving grace, so to speak, is that we're not setting this plan and it can't be changed by anyone else. If the community doesn't like the vision that we put forth, then they can put people here who they would prefer to, you know, direct the vision in a different way. And it can change. And so, you know, I'm glad of that. You know, some people don't like it, but you have the opportunity to change it. Some people see that from the optimistic side and say, here's how I want to see this community improve even more. So, you know, that's the beauty of this country, the beauty of our electoral process, the beauty of our ability to represent our residents that put us here to serve them. So, you know, I'm intrigued. I'm excited about the opportunity that we have here to look at what 2040 could be. But the reality is that when the first one was put together, it wasn't. We weren't expecting what we see today. And what we put together now is not going to be reality in 2040. If we get close, I'll be really happy. If we're in the general ballpark, that'll be nice. If we're way off, then in some ways I'd feel like we probably spent a lot of money for naught. But you know, that's what I'm seeing as the opportunity we have here, is to really look at what we're hoping things will be, gathering that feedback from residents, and then trying to implement it the best we can. So just more comments rather than questions, but I just wanted to say, Mr. Mayor, I mean, I think we're on the same page on a lot of this, and I am encouraged by what they're putting in front of us. I can't say that I've read it to the same detail that you have for sure, but I've read through it in a fair amount. And, you know, I think that as we're addressing some of those very specifics, like as an example, the at-home that you brought up, you know, it's economic development does a great job of telling us where our sales tax leakage is, which is basically telling us where residents are buying something from somewhere else. So if they had it in town, then they could buy it from us, from a business that we have here potentially an owner that lives in the general area or maybe a big box, whatever it might be, but we're keeping that sales tax here. And we need to keep trying to gather as much of that information as possible, and also respecting the fact that we're dealing with private property in a lot of cases. I think there's this misunderstanding from a lot of residents that anything that isn't their home is owned by the city. And the fact of the matter is the city has very little property of its own that isn't a baseball field or a soccer field or a passive park. So we don't have a lot of land of our own. But it doesn't mean that we can't have input, and definitely sharing with the businesses, sharing with anyone who might develop commercial, office, industrial, residential, what the residents of Lake Forest would want to see. And being able to communicate that, I think, is incredibly valuable to those property owners. Because ultimately they want to be successful with what they're doing with their property. And that's the best way of doing it, is having some actual facts of what people around here, whether they work, live, or play here, want to see from the land use decisions that we're going to make. So, again, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and I hope that that complimented what you were saying.
It's okay for us to spend some time chatting about this or discussing this. We don't normally do that, but then this is the future development of the city, so I don't mind taking extra time to not debate, but to hash out some of these issues, because it's more than just a single contract. We're not just fixing a road. We're not just doing something. We're trying to set in motion things that will impact people for 20 years. So if we spend an extra 10 or 15 minutes talking about it, that's okay. And I agree with most of what you say. I think you are a little more inclined to, in the balance of listening to what people want and understanding the implications of what happens when you do that. I think that's our role. Anybody can sit and look at those surveys. You give them to anybody, and they say, oh, the people want this, and we can look at that too, but we have that extra obligation of, we have to say, oh, okay, so if you do that, then the implications of that on the police are, the implications of that on traffic are, because people know what they want, but they don't necessarily, they haven't been given the opportunity or spent the time. We have to look at these things. Or if you put that there, crime is going to, that's a bad place to be putting that, or that's going to interfere with traffic. So our job is to listen to what the people want, give it to them whenever we can, but temper that with the knowledge that for example, when the hotels came up, we're building 3 more hotels. So I was very worried that was going to cannibalize our existing hotels. Oh, great, have 3 more hotels. Yeah, isn't that great? But if 2 of my hotels go out of business because 3 new ones came, I don't see where the gain was. So we spent time, with the hotel people. What's your plan? How are you not going to kill the other guys, et cetera, et cetera. And so and I think we did a good job with that. I think those 3 hotels are going to be successful. Give us $750,000 extra dollars, and not harm the other hotels. So I think that's our job is to, on all these issues, is to pursue it and look at the ramifications. And then, yes, if we can do it, then by all means, let's do it wholeheartedly, but maybe you should think about this and doing that. So I think we're on the same page. Unless there are any other comments, we'll close the discussion. Do you need a motion and a vote on that?
I have the motion for staff recommendation, which is to receive and file and then to authorize Phase 2.
Do you have a second?
Yes, sir.
Okay, let's vote.
That motion carries unanimously.
Congratulations and thank you.
Thank you very much. We look forward to continuing this work with you.
Yeah, break time. We normally break at 8 o'clock, so it's 8:05. We'll break for 10 minutes, come back at 8:15, and then finish up. There's more cake in the back.
liability is not what we is trying to police. That's where we're in trouble with.
Item number 10 is the Orange County Mosquito and Vector Control District Representative Regular Agenda Report. Whew. Bob Hostock, welcome.
Boy, that was a mouthful.
Gee, it's like 3 sentences.
Okay. First, I'd like to mention that when I took this job, I said to the start that I'm not going to be just an I man when I take this job. I will, put my 2 cents in when I really thought so. One of our meetings we went through, and it was for aerial spraying in Orange County. To me, which my flags go up as some political hack is getting a donation. But I don't know that for sure. But only 2 cities voted no on aerial spraying unless they can show us conclusive information on when something like that would happen. Evidently, they didn't have that information, and 2 cities voted no on that, and that was one, Lake Forest, and also the city of San Clemente, which both of our cities would probably be the least with a problem of aerial spraying. Most likely be like somewhere like Fullerton or Huntington Beach, Costa Mesa, where a lot of flat land is, where they have a lot of lowland areas. But that's why I said before, I'm not going to be voting a yes, no, I, like any other, people that goes up there. As a matter of fact, when I first got this job, I made sure that, I collect $100 a month for this job. And so I said, okay, I'm going to donate the money so no one can say that I'm getting a payback or anything else. And I do that every time I voted, do any kind of military donations. Most of that's where all of them go, Wounded Warriors and whatever. So that's the way I keep clean on that. Anyhow, here's start with the good news. The 18th, we went to the open house at Vector Control. I invited our Mayor Pro Tem, Leah Basil, there, and she brought her 2 boys. And Michael coined the phrase, the only dead mosquito is a dead mosquito. And everybody got a big laugh out of that, and he enjoyed looking through the microscope to see one of the 80s mosquitoes, where they're very small. And so we had a pretty good time there, and it was kind of an enlightenment for our city council to actually see what happens at one of our meetings. I should pass this out to the city council. What you're getting right now is a map in Fullerton, and we've had so far a problem with mosquitoes in Fullerton. We've had 29 positive mosquitoes tested for West Nile. Now, as I said before, we've found mosquitoes that will travel up to 20 miles, either by winds or a truck or somebody else, but somehow they wind up even 20 miles away. Fullerton is not that far. So we've had 29 confirmed West Nile positive mosquitoes in there. We've had 1 human infection. We've had actually 2 in 2018. And beginning in October 4th, 5th, and 6th, we'll have truck-mounted spraying. And that's not just in one area, that's continuously. So on the 4th, they'll spray that area. The 5th, they'll spray that area again. And the 6th, they'll spray it again. They'll do this at 2 a.m. to 5 a.m. in the morning. So it's not going to affect anybody as far as walking down the street. This will affect probably 3,989 parcels, which is, if you look on the map, it's mostly homes. This kind of thing, I always stress every time I come here that this is a problem of overwatering, especially in this city. I see sidewalks. Now, I don't know if it's the HOA or the city, but we should actually study these sprinklers that we use to water the streets here. Because if you go down Toledo, right up near Ridge Route, you look down there at the creek, you see these huge puddles, and it's stagnant water. So if we get a mosquito that can travel 20 miles, we could have them here. Especially with a dead bird, we even flies to crows or something like this, we even fly further if these got infected with West Nile. So I would like the city to really take a look at a lot of these, streets where we water, and the HOAs too. A lot of these storm drains that are devised on these cities, talking as an engineer now, were terrible. All of Toledo, on the north side of the club, there is no storm drains at all. It all falls back into the HOA, and it goes into the lake where the little culverts are. So there's no storm drain at all. On Toledo, going the other way from Lake Forest, there's only one storm drain all the way up to Ridge Route. All the water that falls across that sidewalk goes in there, goes down into the creek, and then you get these little setted areas. And I actually had another one of our people going out there to test for mosquitoes. And we did have a little bag of mosquitoes. Fortunately, none of them tested for West Nile or anything. But, these are the things that we do, and a lot of people don't realize how much, we do for this city. We treated over 100 different pools and jacuzzis that were abandoned. They get all the green moss around them. I've seen some pictures of them. And we go into those areas and we'll spray it, and treat it for mosquitoes. When we find these things, we can go in and we can get a warrant if we need to. So, we try to prevent these things. So that's why, I just want a heads up to our city, and, I always get this thing is that, I hate this word. We'll do a study. And I never hear anything back after we said, I will do a study. It's kind of like a word like, don't bother me, I'm doing my game on the computer. But it's necessary to look at these things. You see sidewalks out here with it. You see a kind of like a burnt orange on the sidewalk. Well, that's a fungus that's been on the sidewalk, and it's been watered every day, and it's got growth on it because most of that water is not going to the plants. It's running across the sidewalk into the gutter and down to the storm drains. So hopefully we can correct some of these. I'd love to work with the city. I'd love to work with any of the HOAs. And I'd like to bring, one of our vector control people down. And, I'd love to, sit down and, really work with it. I told you, as I've been before, I'm not a political hack. And when I took the job, I really meant it. So hopefully we can do, what we can do for the city, and God forbid we ever had anything like Fullerton is having right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let me ask the city manager, what are we doing about educating people about these things?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I don't know what we are. I'm assuming we're putting things on our website and keeping current that way, but I'd have to verify that. So I could get back to you on that.
Okay, thanks. I on my when I walk my dogs, there's a part of the street that's got this burnt orange.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking it's just died from the tree. It never occurred to me that there's a fungus there. So
you can look underneath in a microscope.
I don't usually carry the microscope when I'm walking.
I'll show you
my
one.
dog.
I got one at home.
But that's important stuff. So if you could do that, and then maybe I'll get back to Bob or Bob and us. We should get back to Bob and us and see what we're doing and see if we couldn't do more.
Yeah, I mean, if we can save water, that's even better.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any questions?
The forum, the open house that I attended with you a week or 2 weeks ago, that was really informative. I highly recommend if they have another one, I recommend City Council attend it. It was really eye-opening. And just see my son, it was priceless. It was just the perfect timing. We have a saying in our house, cockroaches, mosquitoes, and flies. The only good kind is a dead kind. So he's on it. I've already been teaching my boys. They've been looking for mosquitoes. But something that occurred to me when you were speaking about the water issue and standing water, I don't know if we have another HOA forum scheduled, but I think that's a really good idea to if we have all the HOAs together, to educate them all at the same time so they can go back and share this information, because it's really important. I mean, as you were talking, I'm thinking of one particular neighbor who always has running water, and I see it in the gutter, and the gutter's turning green. And I could end up with Aedes mosquitoes there because my neighbor isn't maintaining his.
Well, we do have Aedes mosquitoes just in one spot right now in the city. That's near Aliso Creek.
Actually, I heard it's now at Concourse Park as well.
Well, it's moving over. We saw Bob Cummings, our lab person who you met before, was showing the map of how much this will be growing, and by 2019, it looks like that little area has gotten like this, and then probably by 2020, it'll be all over the city. Yeah. It's something that you just can't stop, but at least we can prevent it a little bit by slowing it down. So that's all we can do.
Well, thank you. I think you're doing a great job. I'm glad you enjoy this. It's clear that you enjoy it because you're really taking this seriously. So thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
I don't think the next HOA forum is until next year unless we have that tree thing.
Correct.
So
I'll be glad if you want. I can have one of the people from Vector Control come down too.
Yeah.
okay.
So,
We're
receive
not
and file.
scheduled till next year, but we may in fact have one more sooner. Given how is that coming? By the way.
We're working on grant parameters, and we're going to be reaching out to the HOAs for a potential grant opportunity for them. So depending on how complicated it is, we may have another HOA forum, but we haven't made that decision yet.
Okay, thank you. Item number 11 and our final item for the night.
Mayor and members of the council, back to item number 10. This was a consensus item put on by Tom Cagley, suggesting that you make the Orange County Vector Control Rep a standing agenda item. And so I just wanted to make sure that the council intended to make a decision on that tonight.
A standing, well, I think if there's something, if he's got something to, suppose he has something to say, or something, well, that's what kind of, yeah, he's always got something to say.
I would think that in the past we've done it with public comments at the beginning, but the fact is give him preferential treatment on that, to where he knows he's coming in, he calls or that. But giving us an update. Most of the mosquito activity is going north of us, but the fact is, we like to know when they're spraying and that, and so updates on what has been caught and what has been found, and when West Nile or Aedes have been discovered in higher quantities. I'd like to hear the updates, but I don't think that's something we need to put on the agenda items because we have our quarterly reports anyways.
Yeah, an alternative could be to, if there isn't a need for an update, to put in a speaker's form during the quarterly update. That way the item would be pulled and there would be time to have a report. That's another way to approach it.
Okay.
Well, or, if he's got something to say and the 3 minutes isn't enough, the mayor can always extend and say.
True.
Yes, mayor's prerogative. You can
so
allow
that if we have a lot of material, then we could expand it. If there's nothing, but then it's.
That makes sense, because
So
he's
let's-
already coming in for.
I'll second that motion. Is that a motion?
Well, the only wrinkle to that is, I was reminded by the city attorney, is if we allow one speaker extra time, you'd have to allow everyone else that extra time.
Well, it's not exactly true. sat through many meetings where people were given extra time.
Here's a suggestion. Why don't we have it where he comes for public comments like he has been for the 3-minute time period, but if there's something that's really pressing and he knows it's going to take longer, like the video that we saw of the man who suffered from the West Nile virus in Newport Beach, that maybe he could reach out to city manager and say, I have a presentation, may I add it to an upcoming agenda, and then you can add it if he requires more than the 3 minutes of his normal monthly update.
Okay, that sounds...
Because, I mean, if we do quarterly, but it's something that's pressing, now we're waiting 2 additional months when it's something we need to hear now. So at least that way, there's flexibility. He's still going to give us our 3 minutes of public comments, but yeah, if it's something that requires additional time, then he can request it.
Okay, well, he doesn't need permission to use public comment. He can do that anyway. Right. So then we're authorizing him to notify you in advance if he's going to require more than the 3 minutes, and then we'll put it on the agenda.
Well, we could treat it the way we treat requests for proclamations and so forth, so it could be something, the prerogative of the mayor, as to whether it should be added or not.
Okay. I'll second that.
Sounds good.
Okay, so well, it's not part of it. He's free, as everybody is, to use public comments if he wants to do a report. If he has a substantial report, he'll notify us, like
Correct.
as in a proclamation, in advance, and then we may or may not, or may put it on the agenda on that basis. Okay.
Do we need to vote on this?
And I don't think we have to vote on that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on. Item 11, local business preference policy, submitted by city manager.
Mayor and members of the council, I'd like to turn it over to Keith Neves, the assistant city manager.
Mayor and members of the City Council, back in June when we brought an update to the purchasing guidelines, the council asked us to bring back, go out and do a little bit of research and information on a local business preference policy. So tonight I will show you the research, and we'll walk through just a short PowerPoint presentation, and we can kind of get to understand what a local preference policy is. So a local business preference policy is, currently we do not have one, so we are currently just kind of an open market policy city. So it's not open market policy, but an open market where anybody who comes in the best price or the best qualified on RFPs is going to get the contract. A lot of local preference policies are very limited by legislation or regulations, and they're only good for really supplies, equipment, and non-professional services. Local business preference policy, we did some research, and out of 11 cities that we researched, and that's in the staff report, 55% of those of local cities have a policy. That's not 55% of all local cities. That was only out of the 11 cities we researched. A lot of them had a local business preference, and it ranged anywhere from 1% to 5%. And it was all over the board, really. Some of them were at 5, some of them were at 2, some of them were at 1. And a lot of them, not a lot of them, but some of them had limits. Most of them were economic development tool, to try to keep the local businesses and contracts that the city is putting out, giving them to local businesses and giving them a little, the 1 to 5%, giving them a little bit of a boost to get the contract. And then on the table we have, this is a good example of how a local preference policy would work. And we put 5% just as an example. So if you look at our current practice on the table up on the screen on the left-hand side, you have local business A and then non-local business B. So if local business A was $25,000 and non-local business B was $24,500, you go down the line, and the award would be given to the non-local business B. But if you look with a local preference policy, and you look at local business A, $25,000, non-local business B, $24,500. The local business is going to get anywhere, so we're saying 5% is an example on this. It could be 2%, 1%. You would take off $1,250, and now their adjusted pricing would be $37.50. So they would get the contract because they would have the lower price, but you're actually going to come back and pay them the full $25,000. That's how a local preference policy kind of works. So tonight, what we're asking, because is provide direction on a policy. Do you want to have us bring back more information, an ordinance, and actually adopt a local preference policy? We need you to indicate a percentage. What would the percentage be? 1%, all the way to 5%. As you see in the staff report on the chart we showed you the other cities, it kind of ranges and it's all over the board. Do you want a dollar cap or a limit? As you see in the chart in the staff report, there's some cities that put a cap on it, $1,000, $2,000, $5,000. And then what we need to do is adopt an ordinance. We bring back an ordinance either the next meeting or the following meeting, and then we'd have to revise the purchasing guidelines. So with that, I will turn it back over to the City Council, and I can answer any questions that you may have.
Questions from the audience?
No, Your Honor.
Facebook Live?
No, sir.
Okay, colleague?
Sure. Thank you, Mayor. I appreciate it. First question for staff. How many contracts would have been awarded differently under a local preference model of, we'll use the 5%, the top of your range. So if you look back over the last year, 5 years, I mean, are there a significant number, or would we have, I mean, even if you can just ballpark it? So.
Probably very little. I mean, I can't ballpark. I don't want to put a number out. I do so many contracts, I can't even imagine counting all those contracts. But this is not going to, I would say a half a dozen.
Okay. All right, because I usually see the spread as, quite significant between bidders and range, and a lot of times with our contracts, there are very, very few contracts end up having Lake Forest companies bid on them, just because of the nature of some of the contracts and the types of businesses that we have. And so, it's I'm just curious, and that answered it the best you can. So it's, if this comes back, if there's, without doing too much research, if there's a way of getting to what would actually change here.
Yeah, we would have, if the council wants to move forward and bring back an ordinance, and we set some parameters to that tonight, we can put a little more in the staff report and try to research how many contracts that might affect in the staff report, so you can read the staff report, know what it's affecting in the city of Lake Forest.
Okay. And to be fair to, my colleagues who are supportive of this, I mean, I realize the fact that if there is a preference, that there could potentially be people bidding on contracts that aren't currently bidding because, they don't feel like they would compete very well. But if they had a local preference, maybe they would decide to. So, willing to definitely take that into account. But that's the only question I had at this point. So, thanks.
Okay, so just a little more information for the City Council. Anything under $10,000, a director can sign, and it's kind of bid on open market. I kind of say that in the staff report. This would be anywhere from the $10,000 to the $50,000, or outside of Public Works. Public Works are low bid. That's state law. We can't get around that. This would not affect those. Those are probably the biggest contracts in the city and the biggest dollar amount in the city. This would be maybe some printing contracts. If we all look back, the PM group is always, going after the contracts in the city for the printing. This could affect a contract like that, and maybe a few other contracts like that the local business is actually in Lake Forest and is actually applying to do, is actually putting in for the RFP or the bid.
Can you indulge me one more question,
Sure.
Mr. Mayor? Why would we not follow the Public Works model across the board? What advantages are there for us to not do that with everything that we do? And I realize the fact that, you're tying your own hands, but I like the fact that lowest responsible bidder is the one that we go with Public Works contracts. I don't know if I phrased that exactly the way that they do. Okay, great. But it's that's how I approach just about everything. It's possible that I may have voted on a couple that weren't the lowest, but usually they're, like I can think of, I think we ended up having one that was a government affairs one, and it was sticking with our consultant who we'd had because we were in the midst of legislation with the state of California, and so they were a little bit higher, but I felt like changing horse midstream, if that, whatever it was, changing direction midstream, but whatever that phrase is, I felt like that was inappropriate in the moment, and that we probably would have ended up not being as successful. But I mean, I really feel like I could probably count them on one hand, and so that's been how I've approached just about every contract. I feel, and maybe I'm just not remembering them well, but over the 6 years, just very, very few. And that seems to me to be the most appropriate way of doing it. When they're the lowest responsible bidder, then it's very clear. And I would almost prefer that policy to anything, because that's telling the residents of Lake Forest that we value your dollars more than anything else. We're going to make sure that they're a responsible and responsive bidder to the RFP, but they're going to be the cheapest one out there because I'm being frugal with your tax dollars. So that's what seems to make the most sense to me. Anything beyond that, I definitely appreciate the desire to try to support local businesses. The fact of the matter is the business owner could live in Huntington Beach or could live in the Philippines. The employees from a contract from a potential bidder in Huntington Beach, half their employees could live in Lake Forest and they commute up there. So, there's so many different ways of looking at that issue, and how do we really benefit the residents of Lake Forest the most? I feel like the easiest way of doing that is just going with the lowest bidder out there, bar none. So, but again, my question for staff is just, what are some of the downfalls that you see on the public works side when your hands are tied? So just so that I understand the con side of that.
Well, not having all RFPs, professional services, over my years of experience of seeing it in a city, that sometimes it's better to pay a little more because you're going to get a better product in the end. There are some public works projects, by state law, you have to go with the lowest responsible bidder, and most of those are construction contracts. I've seen over time that there are some very good professional services on the RFP side that, yes, they are a little more expensive, but ultimately it's bringing the city a better product, or whatever subject that is that we're going out to RFP for. It's going to help the city down the line much better than just having the lowest responsible bidder. And that's just my opinion of what I've seen over my career.
And just to respond, and I'll stop here because I don't want to take this too long here. That's the responsive part to it for me, where I've kind of got hung up at times has been that it seems like a few of the bidders are responsive to the RFP, but one is potentially showing something a little bit extra than someone else would. And usually my frustration is just with how we've crafted the RFP, because we see something on the back end that, wow, I really wish we would have included that in the RFP, and it gives us that flexibility to go that route when we didn't necessarily know that ahead of time, and you don't have that flexibility with public works projects, I understand, but so that's where I get hung up is that if all bidders had known that that was a requirement, maybe they would have shared that, where one chose to share it in their proposal, and so they look better than bidder number two, and then bidder number two saying, well, yeah, you should have just told me. Yeah, of course we have that as well, but we didn't include it in our bid because we weren't asked to. And so that's, again, I won't belabor this anymore, but I appreciate the response.
Yeah, but some of those, I'll take a couple examples that when we rate an RFP, we rate the RFP and we score it, and then we have an interview with the prospective vendors and we score that. And then now that we've changed the purchasing guidelines, we've brought price into it a little bit more. When we brought those back to you in June, we brought that scoring factor into it. So I think that evens it out a little bit with that bringing into it. But sometimes when you sit there and you're physically there, maybe we didn't put enough in the staff report to fully let you understand what staff saw in both the scoring of the RFP and the scoring of the interview. And that's probably what you didn't see, and probably we didn't do a good enough job doing, is so you could understand what we understand when we went through the process and saw what we saw in the process. Even though on the ones I went through, all of them, were given all the same information. Maybe one just, hey, the way he's going to do this is going to save us a whole lot of staff time, and we're not going to be having to babysit him through this RFP. And this guy or this vendor over there knows how to do that. And these really didn't give us that feeling. So that's where I kind of go where, if it's a little bit more, that's where you would pick that vendor.
A couple of comments, Mr. Mayor, if I might. First, do we have any set-asides? The federal government has set-asides for minority and women-owned businesses. Do we have that at all in this city, or is that even legal?
I don't know. I don't think so. No.
Okay. Second question I have is, excuse me, sir, is how do we know it's a local business? We had an issue come up several months ago, and an office in, I think, Phil Hill Ranch had to bid, but it's actually a San Diego firm, so it's not local. How can you sort that out? Because so many firms are not local, but they have a local office.
And that is, there are some businesses that people think are in Lake Forest because on the warrant, the address says Lake Forest, but that's just a mailing address, and the business is actually outside of Lake Forest. We would bring a form back, and they would need to sign a form that their business is physically located in Lake Forest. And if we bring an ordinance back, if council asks staff to bring this back, with that ordinance, we will have that form with this ordinance, and you would approve that form where they would be signing that their business is physically in the city of Lake Forest.
And from what you've said, more than half the cities you survey do this?
Yeah, the 11 cities that we did survey.
So 6 out of 11?
Yes.
Did that?
And they are all on the chart that you see in the staff report.
Right. And there's no extra cost to us to the doing of this?
The cost is, very minimal in my belief, because it's not going to affect that many contracts. The cost is, yes, you are giving it, just like we show on the example on the chart, the local business A is getting a reduction and getting the work when you could have awarded it to the non-local business for a little bit cheaper. You're still paying that local business the $25,000 instead of the non-local business would have been $24,500. So you're deciding on a percentage. Now, we just showed you a 5% because it was easy. Trying to show you the math the easiest way.
Is there any reason not to do it?
It's not that big of a dollar amount we're talking about, and we'll try to do a little more research if the council wants us to bring this back and show you. We're going to have to go through some contracts and a year's worth of contracts and see which ones would have stayed in Lake Forest under a certain percentage and see what that dollar amount would have been.
I'd like to see that.
And we could, that might push us back another week out, but another meeting out, not another week out, but we'd have to do a little research.
Yeah, and so economic development and I and the city manager are talking about homeless prevention is one of the things in businesses that are sometimes on the brink of going out of business, and then you're out of business and suddenly you can't make your mortgage, and suddenly there's a whole series of steps in there. So it may not seem like a lot of money to a city with a budget of $40 million a year, but a $25,000 contract or a $50,000 contract to a small business may just be what paid the rent next year or next month. So it may be, although for us it's a small amount, it may not be a small amount for a small business that we're able to help.
Yeah.
So I don't see the downside. Well, I'll move.
So
I'll move that you go forward and construct the ordinance and
Okay.
the doing of that, the information that the mayor pro tem, to bring it back with that information and also with the physical location. We don't want to be giving it to
Yes,
San Diego.
we'll have a form. We kind of need the council to make a decision on a percentage, because when we craft up the ordinance, is it 1%, 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%? You see it's kind of all over the board in the chart on the other cities, so there's, everybody's kind of just picked a number and done it. There's not enough research out there or cities that are really doing it that, hey, everybody's going to 2%, everybody's going to 5%.
And how about if we do this in two phases, the first, whether or not we do the ordinance, and then the second, the amount? Because somebody might object to the ordinance at 5%, but not at 2%. So it seems like there's two issues there. Do I do the ordinance at all, which it seems Councilman Robinson doesn't want us to do it, but would we do the ordinance at 2% that Voights might want? So there's two issues there. So how about if the first motion then is to go ahead with the ordinance and with the local fiscal requirement and with the data that the Mayor Pro Tem wanted?
And then another is a dollar cap, as you see on the chart in the staff report, that cities put a cap. Some cities put a cap on it. Some cities it's unlimited.
Why would we put a cap on it?
You would just control the cost more.
But we're not dealing with a very large amount of money because based on law, we can't go, past $30,000 anyway, because anything beyond that, there's legislation that, isn't there a cap for city manager discretion for purchasing power? Because that's kind of what we're dealing with. It's basic costs for services like cakes, cookies, things like that. We're not dealing in hundreds of thousands of dollars typically.
Yes, we are. It could be one that goes back to the city council for a large contract.
Can you give me an example?
Let's say De Novo Planning Group was in the city of Lake Forest. It's an RFP. It went out, and I'm not.
Well, that would be a professional service, so it would be a large commodity buy. Say we did a contract for printing, and it's a $100,000 print job. Then it's a little pricier.
Okay.
So I think what we could do is come back with the additional research, and we'll give you scenarios, and then the council can decide whether they want to move forward and under which scenario. We'll put some percentages and caps together to give you a sense.
Yeah.
And then after that, we could just come back with a boilerplate ordinance.
Sounds good to me. I like that.
Okay, so that's your motion,
I'll move the city manager's recommendation.
and I'll second it. Let's vote.
I'm going to make a substitute motion. I don't even expect a second, but my substitute motion is going to be that we move forward with all contracts the same we do with public works contracts, and that's with the lowest responsible bidder, and that we move forward in that direction. So that's my motion. I don't expect a second, but just wanted to state it. So
I'll second that.
All right, so the motion is to go ahead with the, what he said, lowest responsible bidder regardless, and no local preferences. So if that vote passes, then we won't vote on the Mayor Pro Tem's motion. If that vote fails, we will vote on the Mayor Pro Tem's motion.
to City Attorney, just do I have a problem with the motion? Is it off topic here? Or?
No, the topic's fine. There are certain contracts that can't be bid in that manner. So my assumption is that if this were to go forward, we would come back with an ordinance within the parameters allowed by state law. So there are certain contracts, like engineers' contracts, planners, attorneys, for example, that cannot be bid out in that manner. They have to be done based on professional skill.
Okay. Well, obviously don't want to do anything that we can't legally do, but I was just kind of some of my earlier questions of, just what could we do similar to the public works contracts and the way they're set up. So I'd prefer that we were always selecting the lowest bidder out there.
So, as we clarify this, right now we go to the low bid. You find someone to do our booklet, our taste of our shop and dine. We go to the lowest bidder.
Correct. Yes. So for public works projects, like we've discussed, we're required to take the lowest responsive bidder. For the other category where we're doing bids, we're technically not required to, but we always recommend the lowest bidder. I think the situations where you see us recommend someone who doesn't have the lowest cost tends to be on the professional services, like the engineers, the planning firms, and so forth, where it's qualifications based.
So if I understand the attorney, Councilman Robinson's motion's not legal, or gets us into legal trouble?
Not necessarily. There are components of the purchasing policy that could be changed to do exactly what he's outlining. We would just have to take certain services out of that motion, for example, engineers, planners, et cetera. But all other items could be bid out in the manner that's outlined.
So does he have to make a different motion?
I think the motion as made and as explained is understood, so we could go forward with that motion with the understanding that there are certain things that be pulled out.
Make it legal if it
Oh, yeah,
passes?
absolutely.
All right, then, unless there's any more discussion, we'll vote on the substitute motion, and if it passes, then that's it. If it fails, then we can vote on the original motion. Vote, please.
That motion fails with Mayor Gardner, Mayor Pro Tem Basil, and Councilmember Cagley opposed.
Okay, let's vote on the Mayor Pro Tem's motion, which is to go ahead and have you bring back the whole thing without an ordinance, but, the entire picture. Vote, please.
That motion carries with Councilmember Robinson opposed.
Okay, City Manager's report.
I have nothing further this evening.
You don't want to tell them about the trees? You kind of hinted at it, maybe people...
Well, there's been an announcement that we got through OCFA that there is grant money from CAL FIRE for tree removal that HOAs could apply for, with the city being the lead agency. So we're researching that grant opportunity, and then we're going to roll out that to the HOAs to let them know that it exists and to see how much interest and how we could coordinate that. So there'll be more information forthcoming.
Okay, great, thank you. Was the fire OCFA, they're gone, huh? Yeah. It's a very good presentation. By the way, the Leadership Academy gets better and better every year. I go to it every year, so I can say that. And for those of you listening on Facebook Live who haven't done that yet, please enroll. It's very informative. You just get good information. The chief was there last week with the fire guy. It's just great information. It's a great series and better every year. Council comments, starting with Councilmember Cagley.
Just three quick ones, I hope, sir. First off, this HOA and voter, if I get out of line here, Mr. Attorney, let me know. We don't control HOAs. As a former candidate, I love the opportunity to speak to groups of people that HOAs have put together, and I just think that they're great, and I think that Mr. Holtzclaw's comments were pretty accurate, and the fact that Jim Reichert has exercised these things for years, or moderated them for years, I don't think it's particularly relevant. Yes, Jim's a friend of mine, has been for several years now, but when he did the 2014, I thought he did very well, very professionally. So I'd encourage you, other HOAs, instead of complaining about the fact that HOA Lake Forest 2 gets out there and is proactive, the other HOAs join the parade and get in there and be proactive also and invite the candidates so they can meet their people. Secondly, over the weekend, I was notified by one of our residents that the Foothill library had been closed. He sent me a photo of it. I contacted the city manager, and because I thought, since I'm the library representative on the council, I thought, gee, I missed a meeting or something. And the city manager said, no, I hadn't missed a meeting. She didn't know about it either, and she got it straightened out. But we do try and stay on track of these things for the cities because that's our job and my responsibility as on the library commission. Finally, on the general plan, yes, we're looking forward 22 years into the future, but we're not precinct. We can't write a plan that can't be changed because, thinking back to your example, in 1907 or 8, Kokomo, Indiana passed an ordinance that said that anybody bring a horseless carriage into town had someone walking in 10 feet in front of it waving a red lantern. They didn't change that ordinance until 1960, but which is long past the point of time. The point simply being that what we do here, we plan, we look forward the best we can, but we're not writing a constitution. We're writing a document. It will be a living document. It will be changed by the citizens as they need to have it changed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Robinson.
Yeah, just first, you mentioned something about the OCFA and a grant. Is that something that came through our grant consultant? or did that come some other?
No, that came through OCFA. OCFA let us know about that grant.
Okay. Could you possibly update us on what progress we're making with respect to grants? Because we're
Sure,
spending money, so I'd just like to see. And you may have given it to us in pieces, but if you can just give it to me in some comprehensive way so that I kind of understand where all their work and effort has been going, that'd be great.
Sure, we'll put something in the update.
Okay, thank you. And then beyond that, we had the Taste of Lake Forest. We had the Shop and Dine Month. I feel like the event just keeps getting better and better every year. I want to commend the staff, especially the salary employees that, for the most part, I guess you're kind of volunteering your time, so to speak. You're not getting paid hourly, overtime, anything like that. So just want to let you know how much I appreciate that. Appreciate all the volunteers, Chamber of Commerce, everyone that gets involved in that. I think it's a really fun event for the community, and it just keeps getting better and better every year. Kind of shared some of my comments with staff on little areas where I felt that we could improve, but I just want to commend you all tonight for the effort that's gone into that. It's a really cool event. So thanks a lot. Have a good evening.
Councilman Voights?
I too attended the Taste of Lake Forest this last weekend. Got there a half hour before it started, stayed 15 minutes after it started. The excitement, the enthusiasm was there. Had to leave for a soccer game, but when I got back, I got there just before close. It's like 10 to 3. But to my great surprise, there was still food available. And so I want to compliment the staff and Lake Forest Chamber of Commerce for coming up with the $1 ticket per taste. I think that carried the restaurants through the day to where within the first hour and a half, there was no food at any of the vendor booths. And this year, it lasted till the end. And so there was actually people still visiting some of the, grabbing the leftovers from the last vendors that still had food there. So it made it a lot easier. And I think in the past, it seemed like it was a burden on the businesses, because how much food do you really want us to bring? Because it would go to so quickly. So this was a great idea, and I've got to commend the staff. The cleanup crew, obviously our city employees were out there helping. It was a great thing. So my hats off to you. Thank you for a job well done.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Just want to make one correction to your earlier statement about the draft for the general plan. You had one error in your forward-looking theory from the 1900s. If we were looking back then, I probably wouldn't be on this council because I couldn't vote. Just a correction. But otherwise, it was a really good scenario. On a side note, I don't know if many are you aware of AB 1912. It's a bill that was just signed by Brown on Saturday. It now makes cities liable for unfunded pension liabilities for the OCFA. So he just signed that into law. While I'm on the OCFA board, and one of our motions during the meetings was to go back to and make some amendments to the AB 1912, and we were able to get them to agree that the only time that people will be liable for unfunded pension liabilities is when the JPA dissolves. So at least the city is safe for now because the JPA is solid. They've got a really good pension pay down program right now. So by the time the JPA comes up for renewal in 2030, there will be no unfunded pension liabilities. So we are safe there. So that's good news. So I just, in case you guys start hearing news, coming out about AB 1912, we're on it, and it's not going to negatively affect us, even though it was approved. And thank you, and have a good evening.
Okay, thank you. I don't know if you've seen it, but the OC Register had their Best of OC came out again, and we had about a dozen businesses come up number 1, number 2, or number 3 in that, and about another dozen or so who are franchises who came up in there. So as we did last year, I'm going to ask Carlo to prepare an award ceremony so we can recognize their outstanding achievement, which fits because of the outstanding achievement of the city. So it fits that we recognize the outstanding achievement of our businesses that brings me, of course, to the chief and the low crime rate. But again, we started the meeting today and we end the meeting today talking about being debt-free. And that was a contribution from many people over many years. So we can all take a reward from that. The impetus for that, though, I mean, many people participated, but it wouldn't have happened if Keith Neves, who our finance director then, because he did such a good job there, he's the deputy city manager, that was his idea. 6 months or so ago, whenever it was, we sat down and we were trying to figure out what to do. Then he said, well, what about this? I said, holy shit, what about that? Why are we sitting there? So that's a great achievement by many people, and it gives us a big distinction, saves us $1 million. But that idea itself in the original belongs to Keith for giving that to us. So thank you very much for that idea. And thank you for being here tonight, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.